Ever since the dawn of time, humanity yearned to create, from art to sports to music and then finally, games. We as well as plenty of other species wish for entertainment, simply to allow us to cure boredom and to cheer us up if we are feeling down. This is a natural response, and scientists come up with new discoveries about how different species entertain themselves in different and unique ways, which just goes to show how much we yearn to stimulate our brains. As someone born in 2003, the world of technology and entertainment has been rapidly changing, with new games, consoles, and breakthroughs within the entertainment industry happening almost every other day. Watching this change as I was growing up made it rather personal, as it felt like I would never grow out of this form of entertainment, and made me appreciate it immensely due to its ever-expanding horizon. As my final project involves creating a game from scratch, I needed to research and educate myself on what makes a video game. I am talking purely in a metaphorical sense, of course. I know that video games are a matter of taste, and therefore my own taste would greatly impact exactly what my game would be about. But of course, I took the time over the summer and in between work and adult stuff to actually play games and observe them, on a technical level, as well as an artistic and thematic level. For years, scientists were scratching their heads wondering why we create. Aside from it being a fantastic way to show how we evolved as a species and how times have changed, oftentimes humans created as a way to worship. For each art painted or writing carved or even weapon created, it was in the name of some deity, but it varied depending on geographical origin and cultural differences. In Egypt, most art and sculptures were made in worship, whilst in Japan, plenty of poetry was made for philosophical reason or simply for fun. Whatever the outcome was, it probably had a political, religious, or social reason, as we mostly created based on our feelings. Music, poetry, art, or sculpting was and still is a fantastic way to release those emotions that are undistinguishable and hidden deep within ourselves, which is in part why Cesar A. Cruz, which I have possibly very badly said, stated that art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable, and oftentimes it does, as picturing the raw emotion on a canvas is completely different from hearing it be said out loud. On the other hand, some people simply create for fun or to entertain others. Often bringing joy to other people does release those good feeling hormones in us, which is what pushes us to continue doing it. Oftentimes, my friends and family were my pushing force through art block, and because I am a people pleaser and enjoy bringing smiles to people, I would push myself to draw, which in turn had allowed me to grow as an artist and slowly begin experimenting with implementing my very real feelings within my fantasy pieces to create this contrast between reality and fantasy. Even if we don't understand why it is within our instincts to consume entertaining media or to create it, it is still undeniably the most important part that makes us human. It serves no survival purpose. Or maybe it does. I mean, it had been proven that art of any kind does as well within our mental health. So maybe that may be why we create? Aside from entertainment, games are also a fantastic way of storytelling. And that is why I have decided to use video games as my medium. Plenty of games such as What Became of Edith Finch, Unpacking, or Bold Escape Free are heavily narrative driven. It is the story that draws us in regardless of how simplistic and complex the game can be. And unlike movies, oftentimes the players can heavily or somewhat impact how the story goes, which makes them feel important and more engaged as they are part of the story instead of just watching the story on a screen. That is not to say that plenty of games that don't have a strong narrative and are often only gameplay based aren't successful. There are many games such as Risk of Rain 2, Escapist, Terraria, Minecraft, and plenty more that have very little story but still work anyway due to the fun offered by the gameplay element by itself. Especially sandbox games such as Terraria have very little lore sprinkled here and there, but not enough to actively push you in a specific story-driven direction. Though I think we can all agree that the biggest example is Minecraft, with very little story present within the game itself aside from certain objects that offer speculations and theories about what had happened before the player joined the world, of course. Despite the lack of narrative, everyone loved this game, and it became one of the most sold games globally, which is because of one important factor. You, as the player, made the story, which is proven by the endgame poem, which still in full honesty brings a tear to my eye. This meant the world to children and adults all over the world, as Minecraft was likely the first game they have ever played. This is why video games are an incredible source of entertainment, and often why new games, with incredible stories, gameplay, draw in different people who likely never touched a game before in their life. and I think that first game oftentimes shapes our tastes in games and entertainment, which perfectly starts off the next point of my video. I think we can all agree that we look upon games from our childhood with fondness and an odd feeling of sadness. When you play video games as children, we usually overlook certain heavy topics present within stories, as well as play those games about the worries that you begin to have when you start growing up, which is why that feeling of nostalgia about your favorite childhood game is very sacred. And this also unfortunately means that you will never be able to play such a game with the same mindset and feelings that could leave you disappointed. Nostalgia is incredibly important in order to stay true to ourselves. It allows us to see where we came from and how much we have grown and changed. This is why certain people that use video games as a way of primary entertainment enjoy games that are part of a series they played as a child. Most notably are the Mario series, Assassin's Creed series, Legends of Zelda series, Resident Evil series, and plenty others that have grown with its audience, either creating new and improved versions of their games or remaking the older games with a fresh paint of coat and complete rework of mechanics, whilst making sure to stay true to the original. Though one game is very special when it comes to nostalgia, and that is, once again, Minecraft, as this game has truly grown with its audience ever since their release in 2011. They have had plenty of updates that not only improved the gameplay, but also added so many new aspects in order to keep the interest of people, and even kept in mind who would want to play the older versions by allowing them access to the older games through the launcher, even including the first ever version of Minecraft. They even go live once a year to discuss upcoming features and allow the players to vote on a mob that they would like to add. But that hasn't gone without some sort of complaints, as Minecraft has a massive fan base, which means not everyone is happy with the changes and growth the game has gone through, and many players feel betrayed by the directions they have been taking. That is to be expected with many games that have had a long lifespan, including Terraria, as that game had been incredibly loved not only by its community but also its developers, so much so that the only time they had ever betrayed the fans was when they said that they wouldn't update the game anymore, and then proceeded to say that they loved the game too much to let it go just yet, whilst dropping new things, different collaborations, and improving the game. That being said, I took into consideration how games made me feel when I have played them for the first time, the confusion, the tears at times, or heartache or pure joy. It's incredibly magical what a few pixels on your screen can do in order to affect how you feel, and I wish to aim for this when creating my own game. I have spent plenty of hours playing video games over the summer and analyzing them to see what I wish to create. On this screen here, you'll be able to see the games that I had played and what I have rated them as. I never noticed how the pixel style games have truly impacted my way of thinking, as they have been one of the first games that I was really attached to. When I finally got access to a laptop, I have found an RPG Maker game called Ib, about a little girl stuck in an art gallery filled with plenty of horrors. It was the reason I started to love and appreciate horror games, and afterwards I began to seek out plenty of other RPG horror games that have impacted my taste in games: Mad Father, Witch House, Mermaid Swamp, and, once again, Ib. All of which included charming animations, wonderful scenery, and plenty of important yet disturbing symbolism. Those games have been at the back of my mind when thinking of creating a game, though there is one game that had impacted me a lot. The one that stood out among the rest, and in turn directly inspired what the topic of my game would be. Known as iconic among the RPG horror spaces, Yume Nikki is a massive game about the dream world and the endless possibilities of our minds. A game so massive and secretive that not everyone has found its secrets, despite the game being 10 years old at the making of this video. Created in 2004 by Japanese developer Kikiyama, Yume Nikki, or Dream Diary when translated into English, was developed using RPG Maker 2003, and it was the first of its kind that focused on open-ended exploration of the dream world rather than battle sequences and a clear narrative. Despite being criticized for being a walking simulator with no objectives, it gained a cult following in Japan, which later spread to the West once it was translated by a fan, and it was praised for taking a risk and being different to so many other RPG Maker games on the market. Its popularity growing to the point it changed the way that RPG games were created, and was a living proof to aspiring developers that experimentation can lead to amazing results, and as such created a small boom that led to a shift in game development in the early 2000s. With this in mind, I wanted to create a game about dreams, directly inspired by RPG Maker games with you main Nikki being the lead of that inspiration. I wanted to show the bizarre world of dreams and how they are affected by psychology. However, I couldn't do it without researching dreams as a whole, and with this in mind, I conclude my first video essay.